The sun had barely started to rise over the dense jungle when the SEAL team gathered in their base, preparing for one of the most dangerous missions they had faced in years. The air was thick with tension, and every soldier knew the stakes. Today was not just another routine operation. It was a high-risk mission that required complete focus, discipline, and absolute trust in each other. As they sat in the briefing room, the room was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning and the rustle of papers. Each SEAL silently went over their gear, checking their weapons, ammunition, and communication devices. The weight of the mission hung over them like a heavy shadow. Their commanding officer, a veteran with years of experience, walked in. His presence alone brought a sense of seriousness and calm at the same time. He began to explain the mission in detail, pointing to maps that showed the dense green of the jungle and marking areas of interest. The target was a high-value individual, heavily guarded and notorious for being extremely cautious. Rumors suggested he had snipers and highly trained soldiers protecting him, people who could blend perfectly into the jungle. The officers emphasized that this mission was about precision, timing, and patience. A single mistake could cost lives. The team listened intently as the briefing continued. Every member had undergone countless drills, but they knew that the jungle was unpredictable. It was alive with noise and movement, birds calling out, insects buzzing, and the rustle of leaves that could hide both danger and opportunity. They were trained to read these signs, to sense danger even before it became visible. But the stories they had heard about this particular enemy were enough to make even the most confident soldier pause. There were whispers of a sniper who was practically invisible, someone who could disappear into the jungle like a ghost. Each SEAL began visualizing the mission. They imagined moving quietly through the dense undergrowth, alert to every sound and movement. They thought about the possibility of coming under fire at any moment, of having to make split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. The tension in the room was almost tangible. Even though these soldiers were among the best trained in the world, the uncertainty of what lay ahead kept their nerves sharp. After the briefing, the team gathered their gear and checked it again. Weapons were cleaned and loaded, scopes adjusted, and silencers fitted. Radios were tested, and backup equipment double-checked. They knew that, in the middle of the jungle, even the smallest failure could be catastrophic. Each soldier had a role to play, a responsibility to the team, and a responsibility to survive. They understood that, in moments of extreme pressure, relying on training and instinct would be crucial. As they prepared to leave, the commanding officer gave a final warning. Stay alert, trust each other, and remember, the jungle is not just the enemy's home. It's ours too. But one wrong move, and it can turn against you in an instant. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of experience. The SEALs nodded, each one silently promising to stay focused, to watch each other's backs, and to execute the mission with precision. The team then moved toward their insertion point, carrying everything they needed for survival and combat. The jungle awaited them, thick, green, and filled with sounds that could either warn them or deceive them. As they stepped into the undergrowth, the sunlight filtering through the trees, the air became cooler and heavier with the smell of damp earth. Every step was calculated. Every movement was careful. Even the slightest sound could alert an unseen enemy. They moved in formation, communicating with hand signals and subtle gestures to maintain silence. Each soldier felt the adrenaline rising, the mixture of fear and focus sharpening their senses. They knew that once they entered the jungle, there would be no turning back. The mission would test not just their skills, but their patience, teamwork, and courage. And somewhere out there, hiding in the shadows, was the sniper they had been warned about. A shadow in the jungle who could strike at any moment. As the team disappeared into the dense foliage, a tense hush fell over the jungle itself. Birds paused mid-flight, leaves trembled under the weight of the wind, and the jungle seemed to hold its breath. It was as if nature itself was aware of the deadly game about to unfold. The SEALs were ready, but they also knew one truth. In this jungle, the enemy could be anywhere, unseen, watching, waiting. And when that ghost finally revealed himself, Every ounce of training and courage would be tested like never before. The SEAL team moved into the jungle with extreme caution, their senses sharpened to every sound and movement. The dense greenery surrounded them on all sides, the towering trees forming a canopy that let only scattered beams of sunlight fall to the forest floor. The air was humid and heavy, carrying the scent of wet earth and foliage. Every step forward was deliberate, every branch pushed aside with care. The jungle was alive, but its beauty was deceptive. Beneath the rustling leaves and chirping birds, danger could be lurking anywhere. The soldiers advanced in a tight formation, their eyes scanning the terrain constantly. The slightest snap of a twig or rustle of a leaf caught their attention. They had trained for this kind of environment, yet the jungle always demanded respect. It was unpredictable. Paths that seemed clear could hide deep pits, tangled roots, or sudden drops. One wrong step could make a sound loud enough to give away their position to an enemy who was hiding and waiting patiently. Every man in the team knew this, and the silence between them was heavy with concentration. They moved deeper into the forest, and the sounds of civilization faded behind them. The chirping of birds and buzzing insects replaced the distant hum of helicopters and vehicles. The jungle seemed to have its own rhythm, a living entity that could either aid or betray those who dared enter it. The soldiers whispered to each other sparingly, using hand signals to communicate. Words could travel farther than they realized, and they couldn't risk alerting the sniper or the guards protecting the target. Every movement, every sound had to be calculated with precision. Despite their training and experience, a sense of unease settled over the team. They had been warned about the sniper in this jungle, an enemy who was almost invisible, blending perfectly with his surroundings. The SEALs had only heard stories, rumors of a marksman who could strike from extreme distances, disappear into the foliage, and wait silently for hours. Now, moving through the dense undergrowth, they began to understand how real and dangerous that threat could be. They whispered among themselves, "Where's the shooter?" The question was not just rhetorical, it was a shared worry. No one could see him, yet they could feel his presence, like a shadow watching from the edges of their vision. The terrain grew more challenging as they pressed on. Vines tangled around their legs, wet mud clung to their boots, and low-hanging branches forced them to duck and twist. Every obstacle slowed their progress, but they moved with discipline, knowing that speed without caution could be fatal. The jungle itself seemed to be testing them, pushing them to be alert at every moment. They listened for patterns in the sounds around them, trying to distinguish natural movements from the subtle signs of an enemy. Hours passed as the team advanced, and tension grew with each step. The sniper remained unseen, but small signs hinted at his presence. A leaf moved without wind, a branch snapped too sharply, shadows shifted unnaturally. The SEALs were trained to read these signs, to anticipate the unseen, but even they found themselves questioning where the enemy could be hiding. The jungle was perfect cover for someone with skill and patience, someone who understood it as well as they did. Despite the growing anxiety, the soldiers remained calm outwardly. They relied on each other, trusting their team's discipline and training. Any hint of fear or hesitation could be dangerous in an environment where every second counted. The silence between them was not just for stealth, it was a shared understanding that they were being tested, not just by the jungle, but by the unseen sniper waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As they moved, they became more aware of the patterns of the jungle. Birds that normally sang loudly were silent, and insects that usually buzzed in swarms were oddly still. Even the wind seemed to have stopped in certain areas, creating a strange, almost unnatural quiet. The SEALs exchanged glances, realizing that this silence was a warning. The jungle had gone quiet, and when the jungle is quiet, something deadly is often near. Every rustle, every distant snap, caused their hearts to race. The sniper could be anywhere, above in the canopy, hidden in the shadows, or even camouflaged along the forest floor. The SEALs moved carefully, adjusting their formation to cover all angles, scanning the jungle for any movement that seemed out of place. They were professional, disciplined, and alert, but the invisible threat weighed heavily on their minds. The thought of an unseen enemy, waiting silently, made them hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow. By the end of the day, the seals had covered several kilometers of the jungle, moving with the precision and caution of seasoned soldiers. They had yet to encounter the sniper directly, but his presence was undeniable. The tension was constant, and the question that had haunted them since entering the jungle continued to linger. Where's the shooter? Each soldier knew that the real test was still ahead, and the jungle, silent and imposing, held its secrets closely. Even as the sun began to set, painting the jungle in golden and shadowed hues, the seals knew that tonight would be difficult. The sniper could strike at any moment, and the jungle would become a maze of danger and uncertainty. Every movement, every decision had to be made with caution. They were in enemy territory, and the hunter they sought was patient, invisible, and deadly. In this jungle, silence was both a shield and a warning, and the seals had to respect it if they hoped to survive the night. The jungle had been silent for hours, but that quiet was broken in an instant. A sharp, metallic ping echoed through the dense trees, followed by a whistling sound that cut through the air. One of the seals barely had time to react before a bullet zipped past him, embedding itself harmlessly into a nearby tree. The sound was deafening in the stillness, and every soldier froze for a moment, their hearts racing. This was no longer just a mission. It had become a deadly game of cat and mouse. The sniper, whoever he was, had finally announced his presence, and the team felt the invisible threat looming closer than ever. The first reaction was shock, quickly replaced by disciplined action. Each seal dropped to the ground, taking cover behind trees and thick foliage. The soldier who had been almost hit swore under his breath but immediately checked his gear and position, knowing that panic could cost them all. The team was trained for ambushes like this, yet the precision of the shot told them they were dealing with a highly skilled marksman. The bullet had come from a distance, and it had been calculated to send a warning rather than cause immediate harm. The message was clear. They were being watched, tracked, and hunted. The seals tried to locate the source of the shot. They scanned the jungle carefully, adjusting their night vision scopes and thermal imaging equipment, but the sniper remained invisible. There was no movement, no telltale glint of metal, nothing to betray the enemy's position. The team whispered to each other, their voices barely audible over the rapid beating of their hearts. "Where is he?" one asked, echoing the fear and frustration they all felt. Every angle of the jungle was covered, yet the sniper could strike again at any moment, unseen and untouchable. They knew the importance of staying calm. The jungle was an ally to anyone who understood it, and the sniper clearly did. He moved silently, using the natural camouflage of leaves, shadows, and sunlight. Even the most trained eye could miss subtle details in this environment. The seals began to understand that this enemy was not just hiding. He was controlling the battlefield. Every step they took, every movement they made was being observed and calculated. They realized that one misstep could lead to disaster. The team slowly moved forward, keeping low and using hand signals to communicate. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, became a possible clue. The sniper was teaching them a lesson in patience, forcing them to slow down and pay attention to the smallest details. They began to notice the subtle changes in the jungle. A leaf hanging slightly off its stem, a shadow that seemed darker than the rest, a faint glimmer of metal hidden in the undergrowth. These were signs that the sniper had been there or was still nearby. Time seemed to stretch as the seals advanced cautiously. Their adrenaline kept them sharp, but it also heightened every sense. The sound of birds taking flight, the distant rumble of water, even the occasional breeze. All of it could mask the enemy's movements or hide danger. They knew that the first shot was just the beginning. The sniper had demonstrated his skill, and now the team had to anticipate his next move while keeping themselves as invisible as possible. Despite the danger, the SEALs relied on their training. They spread out in a tactical formation, ensuring that each member covered a specific sector of the jungle. Communication was minimal but precise, allowing them to coordinate without giving away their positions. Every step forward was measured, every movement deliberate. They were professionals, and professionalism meant staying focused even when fear and uncertainty threatened to take hold. The sniper continued to dominate the jungle without being seen. The SEALs realized that the fight was not just about firepower. It was about patience, observation, and intelligence. Whoever the sniper was, he had chosen the battlefield carefully, using the jungle itself as both shield and weapon. He was testing them, and the soldiers knew that responding recklessly could be fatal. Each member of the team began to think several steps ahead, anticipating potential angles of attack and planning how to react to any shot fired from the unseen enemy. Hours passed in this tense cat-and-mouse game. The SEALs had managed to avoid any further immediate danger, but the sniper's presence was always felt. Every snap of a branch, every shift of a shadow, reminded them that he could strike at any second. The jungle, once a maze of green beauty, had become a place of suspense and deadly awareness. The team pressed on slowly, moving in small bursts and stopping frequently to scan their surroundings, each man acutely aware of how fragile their safety truly was. By the end of the day, the SEALs had learned a critical lesson. The sniper was not just a marksman. He was a master of the jungle, using every element of his environment to remain invisible while controlling the battlefield. The first encounter had changed everything. They now understood that survival required patience, discipline, and the ability to anticipate an enemy who could be anywhere and nowhere at the same time. The jungle had gone from being a backdrop to a living, breathing entity, one that could hide a deadly predator waiting to strike at the perfect moment. After the first shot, the SEAL team realized that the sniper they were facing was not ordinary. Every step into the jungle had to be calculated with extreme care. The trees and undergrowth were thick, providing perfect cover for someone trained to remain unseen. Every shadow could hide a deadly eye. Every rustle could be a warning of an approaching bullet. The team had trained for months in simulated environments, but the real jungle was far more unpredictable and challenging than anything they had faced before. The soldiers spread out in a tactical formation, ensuring that each member covered a specific sector of the surrounding jungle. They moved slowly, almost deliberately, measuring each footstep to avoid making noise. They scanned constantly, looking for anything that seemed out of place. A branch broken at an unusual angle, a slight shimmer on a leaf, or a shadow that didn't match the sunlight. The sniper was using the jungle as his ally, and the SEALs knew they had to treat the forest with the same level of respect and caution they would give to an enemy firing from open ground. The team attempted to flank the sniper, moving quietly to approach from multiple directions. They knew that finding him meant observing patterns, anticipating movements, and being ready for instant reaction. Every rustle, every movement of wildlife had to be analyzed carefully. Was it a bird, a falling branch, or a sign that the sniper had shifted position? The jungle was alive, but it could also deceive them. The SEALs understood that a single mistake, a single sound out of place, could give away their position and put their lives at risk. They noticed small clues that suggested the sniper was extremely skilled and patient. Disturbed leaves indicated that someone had recently moved through the undergrowth. Shadows seemed darker in some places, as if they were hiding something. Tiny glimmers of metal could be seen if observed carefully, hinting at the presence of weapons or equipment. Every subtle sign was analyzed, every movement questioned. The sniper wasn't just hiding. He was controlling the battlefield, forcing the SEALs to anticipate and adjust continuously. Despite their advanced optics and thermal imaging, the sniper remained invisible. Technology could not easily reveal him. He was almost like a ghost, moving with precision and patience, using every natural element of the jungle to remain unseen. The SEALs realized they were dealing with someone who understood camouflage and concealment better than anyone they had trained with. This was not a simple confrontation. It was a battle of wits, patience, and observation. As the hours passed, the tension increased. The SEALs were constantly on edge, aware that any sudden noise could provoke an attack. Their senses were heightened, every sound amplified, every shadow a potential threat. The jungle itself seemed to conspire with the sniper, hiding him perfectly while giving the slightest warning to those who were paying attention. They learned quickly that survival meant slowing down, observing carefully, and trusting both their training and their instincts. The team communicated through hand signals and subtle gestures, keeping verbal communication to a minimum. Even a whisper could travel farther than they realized, potentially alerting the sniper to their position. Each member of the team had a role. One covered the front, another watched the left flank, someone else observed the canopy for movement, while the remaining soldiers scanned the forest floor. It was a coordinated effort, a dance of precision and patience designed to detect someone who seemed undetectable. They realized that the sniper was testing them as much as they were trying to locate him. His patience was matched by their own need for caution. Every attempt to approach him, to get closer, required analyzing the terrain, watching for patterns, and predicting where he might be. They knew that the sniper could strike at any time, from any angle, and then vanish again, leaving no trace behind. He had turned the jungle into a maze where he was always one step ahead. Frustration mixed with determination as the team pressed on. They understood that rushing would be fatal. Instead, they moved slowly, measuring every step, every hand movement, and every glance. The jungle had become a battlefield of wits, and the sniper had gained the advantage by making himself invisible. Yet the SEALs were determined. They were trained to face the impossible, to handle situations that seemed hopeless, and to adapt in real time. They were not going to be outsmarted. By the end of this stage, the team had covered several more kilometers, carefully reading the jungle and learning to anticipate the sniper's movements. Every subtle change in the environment became a clue, every sound a potential signal. They began to understand the level of skill they were up against. A sniper who was not just hiding, but controlling the battlefield, dictating the pace, and forcing the SEALs to react rather than act freely. It was a tense and exhausting mental challenge, one that tested not just their physical skill, but their patience, observation, and ability to remain calm under pressure. The SEALs realized that survival depended on their ability to remain disciplined, observant, and patient. The sniper was not just a marksman. He was a master of the jungle, and until he revealed himself, the team had to respect both his skill and the environment that protected him. Every movement forward had to be calculated, every glance carefully placed, every decision carefully considered. In this invisible battlefield, the jungle itself had become both an ally and a challenge, and the SEALs were learning the hard truth. To find the unseen enemy, they had to become one with the forest, reading it with the eyes of hunters and the patience of monks. As the SEAL team pressed deeper into the jungle, an unusual silence began to settle over the dense forest. The normal chorus of birds, insects, and distant animal calls had faded. Even the wind seemed to have slowed, leaving the leaves almost motionless. It was an eerie, unnatural calm that immediately set every soldier on edge. They had learned through experience that the jungle silence often came before danger struck. Nature itself seemed to be holding its breath, warning them of the unseen predator watching from the shadows. The team moved carefully, scanning every direction, listening to every faint noise, and reading every subtle sign that could indicate the sniper's presence. Time seemed to stretch unnaturally. The soldiers advanced slowly, each step deliberate and cautious. They paused frequently, crouching low to the forest floor, using hand signals to communicate, and carefully observing the terrain. The tension was almost unbearable. Every leaf that rustled, every branch that snapped, and even the distant sound of water flowing became a potential signal. They understood that one wrong move, one misjudgment, could trigger an attack from the invisible sniper. The jungle, once merely a landscape to navigate, had become a psychological battlefield where fear and focus were constantly tested. The sniper's presence was felt more than seen. The team had yet to get a direct sighting, but small signs hinted at his movements. Disturbed foliage, shadows that shifted unnaturally, and the occasional glint of light reflecting off a hidden weapon all suggested he was nearby. The SEALs realized they were dealing with a highly trained, patient enemy who could strike from a distance and vanish without a trace. It was clear that this was no ordinary adversary. This was someone who understood the jungle as intimately as they did. Every second of waiting felt like an eternity, yet they knew patience was their only way to survive and succeed. The calmness of the jungle forced the SEALs into a heightened state of alertness. Their senses were stretched to the limit. They could hear their own breathing and heartbeat, amplified by the tension in the air. Each soldier relied on subtle cues to detect the sniper: faint disturbances in the underbrush, the direction of fallen leaves, and even the slightest change in the way sunlight filtered through the trees. They realized that the enemy was using the silence to his advantage, letting them think the area was safe while he prepared for his next move. Hours passed in this tense stillness. The soldiers were aware of their surroundings constantly, shifting positions to maintain cover and observing each other to ensure no one was exposed. Despite the eerie quiet, they knew they could not stop moving. The sniper would not reveal himself on their schedule. They had to anticipate his actions, predict his patterns, and stay one step ahead. It was a battle of patience as much as skill, a test of both mental endurance and physical discipline. The jungle, quiet and seemingly lifeless, had become a trap that required constant vigilance. The team began to notice subtle patterns in the environment. Birds that usually called out loudly remained silent. Insects that normally buzzed around leaves and flowers had retreated, and the usual scurrying of small animals seemed to vanish. These changes confirmed what they already suspected. The sniper's presence was suppressing the natural activity of the jungle. He had become the unseen force controlling the forest, dictating not just the movement of the seals but also the behavior of the wildlife. Every member of the team understood the magnitude of the challenge. They were facing an enemy who could manipulate both the terrain and their senses without ever being seen. Despite the tension, the SEALs relied on their training and experience to maintain focus. They reminded each other of the basic principles: move deliberately, observe constantly, and never assume anything is safe. Each pause to scan the surroundings became a practice in patience and discipline. The quietness of the jungle, while intimidating, also provided an opportunity. In the absence of obvious threats, the team could study patterns, anticipate danger, and prepare for the sniper's next move. It was a delicate balance between waiting and advancing, between fear and focus. As daylight began to fade, the feeling of suspense intensified. Shadows lengthened, the temperature dropped slightly, and the jungle became even more mysterious. The SEALs felt the weight of the unseen sniper, knowing he could strike at any moment from any angle. They moved more carefully, communicating with silent gestures and relying on their instincts. The calm before the storm had settled fully over the forest, and every soldier knew the coming hours would be critical. The sniper had taught them a lesson in patience, control, and the power of staying hidden. By the time night approached, the SEALs had adapted to the silence, using it to heighten their awareness and sharpen their skills. They understood that the sniper was watching, waiting, and controlling the battlefield with patience and precision. The jungle was no longer just a location. It had become a partner for the sniper, a tool to confuse, intimidate, and dominate the SEALs. The soldiers knew that the real test was yet to come. The calm was temporary, and soon the sniper would reveal himself in a way that none of them could ignore. The tension in the air was tangible, and the jungle, once merely a challenge to navigate, had become a deadly, living opponent. The stillness of the jungle shattered with the sound of a precise, sharp shot. The bullet zipped past a SEAL, hitting a tree with a loud crack, and the team immediately dropped to the ground. Their hearts raced as adrenaline surged through their bodies. The sniper had struck again, and this time the danger was more immediate. Every soldier instinctively knew that the invisible enemy was closer than ever, blending perfectly with the foliage and shadows. There was no time to panic. Training and discipline kicked in instantly. The team quickly assessed the situation, scanning their surroundings for any sign of movement. The sniper had not revealed himself visually, yet his presence was undeniable. The SEALs were forced to rethink their strategy on the spot. Each angle of the jungle was now suspect, every shadow potentially lethal. They could no longer advance casually. The sniper had demonstrated not just accuracy but the ability to control the battlefield, to dictate when and where the fight would happen. It was clear that patience alone would not be enough. They needed strategy, precision, and teamwork to counter this invisible threat. Communication became even more cautious. The soldiers relied on subtle hand signals and gestures, moving quietly to avoid drawing attention. Every step was deliberate, and every movement measured. Even breathing had to be controlled, as sound carried easily through the dense undergrowth. The seals spread out to cover different sectors, ensuring that no one was exposed to a potential line of fire. Every soldier had to trust the others completely, knowing that a single mistake could cost lives. The sniper's presence forced them to operate at peak alertness, fully aware of the deadly environment around them. The sniper was methodical. He had carefully chosen his position, using natural cover to remain unseen while targeting the team with deadly precision. Each shot was calculated to intimidate and disrupt, to make the SEALs hesitate, and to force them into a defensive posture. He was testing their limits, assessing their reactions, and shaping the battlefield to his advantage. The team realized that they were not just being hunted, they were being studied. Every move they made was feeding information to an unseen, highly skilled adversary. Despite the danger, the SEALs began to adapt. They moved in smaller, more coordinated units, with each member covering blind spots and watching for subtle signs of movement. They looked for disturbances in the leaves, shadows that didn't align with the sun, and the tiniest glimmers that could reveal a weapon or piece of equipment. Every detail became critical. The sniper had turned the jungle into a maze where he could move unseen while controlling the SEALs' actions. The soldiers were forced to become even more observant, analyzing patterns and anticipating potential threats before they materialized. The team also realized that speed alone would not save them. The sniper's patience was his greatest weapon. He could wait hours, even days, for the perfect moment to strike. The SEALs had to match that patience, balancing caution with the need to advance. They learned to pause frequently, to let their instincts guide them, and to move only when necessary. Each step had to be calculated, each decision weighed carefully. The jungle had become a chessboard, and the sniper was a master strategist, forcing them to react to his moves rather than act freely. As the hours passed, the tension escalated. The SEALs were constantly scanning, analyzing, and predicting. Their senses were stretched to the limit. The sniper had forced them into a heightened state of awareness, where every sound, shadow, and movement could signal danger. Even natural elements, the wind rustling the leaves, the movement of birds, or the flow of distant water, became potential distractions that had to be interpreted carefully. The team understood that survival depended on both mental focus and physical discipline. Despite the relentless pressure, the SEALs remained composed. Training and experience allowed them to think clearly even under extreme stress. They adjusted their tactics, repositioning themselves carefully while ensuring that each movement was covered by a teammate. They had learned that staying visible even for a moment could be fatal, and they treated the jungle as both a battlefield and a protective ally, using its natural cover to mask their movements. The sniper's presence continued to dominate the scene. Every shot he fired, every calculated pause, reminded the SEALs of his skill and patience. He could strike without revealing himself, disappear into the foliage, and leave no trace behind. The team understood that the sniper was not only a marksman but a master of the jungle itself. The forest had become an extension of his strategy, allowing him to manipulate the SEALs' movements, control the battlefield, and maintain a constant psychological edge. By the end of this tense period, the SEALs had learned an important lesson. Fighting the sniper was as much about patience, observation, and strategy as it was about weapons. They could not rush or react impulsively. Every movement had to be precise, every decision deliberate, and every second filled with awareness. The sniper had forced them to become hypervigilant, fully aware that the jungle itself could hide deadly threats. The team knew that the real test was still ahead, and they had to be ready for anything the invisible enemy would do next. The jungle had been a place of tension, fear, and uncertainty for hours. Every step the SEAL team had taken was measured, every movement deliberate, and every sound analyzed. The sniper had remained invisible, a ghost controlling the battlefield with unmatched skill and patience. But now, after long hours of waiting, observing, and moving cautiously, the moment of revelation was near. The SEALs had learned to read the jungle like never before, and their discipline was about to be put to its ultimate test. It started subtly. One of the soldiers noticed a faint movement among the leaves high above the forest floor. It was not the usual sway of branches or the flutter of birds. This movement was calculated, almost mechanical, and it immediately drew the attention of the rest of the team. They froze, hand signals exchanged silently. Their eyes scanned the area, following the motion carefully, trying to spot any other clue. This was different from the previous signs. They were seeing an anomaly that could not be ignored. As they focused, another small detail became clear. A glimmer of metal reflecting sunlight from a concealed position. The sniper had given himself away, just slightly, through a tiny imperfection in his camouflage. The SEALs' training kicked in immediately. They adjusted their positions silently, maintaining cover while keeping their focus on the precise area where the movement and reflection were spotted. Every soldier knew that the sniper was not an ordinary enemy. He was highly skilled, and any misstep could be fatal. The tension was electric. For hours, the sniper had been controlling the jungle without revealing himself. Now, with the faintest hint of his presence, the SEALs realized that they were witnessing the first true glimpse of the enemy they had been hunting. Slowly, methodically, they adjusted their line of sight, scanning every branch, shadow, and leaf. The sniper, sensing that his cover might have been compromised, remained perfectly still. He did not panic, did not shift abruptly. His patience and control were as sharp as his aim. As they watched, the outline of a figure became discernible. At first, it was just a shadow, blending seamlessly with the surrounding foliage. But then the shape of a human form emerged, crouched low, almost invisible except for subtle hints of clothing and equipment camouflaged in shades of green and brown. The sniper had mastered the art of concealment. He was a part of the jungle itself. Even now, fully revealed, he seemed almost untouchable. The SEALs understood that what they were seeing was the result of years of training, discipline, and an intimate knowledge of the jungle environment. The team held their breath, careful not to make any sudden moves. They had anticipated this moment but knew that spotting the sniper was just the beginning. One wrong action could provoke a shot that none of them could afford to take. Slowly, they began to reposition themselves, coordinating silently to ensure that each angle was covered. Every hand signal, every subtle movement, was executed with precision. The sniper was no longer a ghost in the shadows. He was a visible, tangible threat, but still incredibly dangerous. As they observed, the SEALs began to appreciate the skill it had taken for the sniper to remain undetected for so long. Every shot fired previously had been perfectly calculated. Every subtle movement, every pause, every detail of the jungle had been used to his advantage. He had dictated the pace of the operation, forced the SEALs into extreme caution, and made them operate under the constant pressure of uncertainty. His patience had been a weapon, and now, finally revealed, the full extent of his mastery became clear. The soldiers felt a mixture of awe and respect. They had faced many enemies, but rarely someone who could manipulate an environment so completely, using it to remain unseen, control movements, and impose fear. The sniper's camouflage was flawless, his positioning perfect, and his demeanor unshakable. He had forced the SEAL team to adapt in ways they had never imagined, stretching their patience, their focus, and their tactical skills to the limit. In that moment, the jungle seemed to shift again. No longer merely a setting, it had become a battlefield where visibility had been restored, and both sides could now react more directly. The sniper, though revealed, still held a tremendous advantage. He had chosen his ground carefully, had mastered the art of remaining hidden, and had forced the SEALs to fight not just him but the environment itself. The tension, the suspense, and the danger were still very real, but now the invisible had become visible, and the team could engage with knowledge and awareness they had lacked before. The revelation of the sniper marked the climax of the team's long hours of careful movement and observation. They understood the challenge ahead. This was no longer a hunt for an unseen enemy. Now it was a test of skill, coordination, and courage against a master marksman who had shown them the full power of patience, control, and environmental mastery. The jungle, alive with shadows and light, had witnessed the first confrontation of visibility and strategy. The sniper had stepped out from the darkness, and the SEALs now faced their most immediate, precise, and dangerous threat head-on. After hours of tense anticipation, the final moments of the mission had arrived. The SEAL team had carefully tracked the sniper through the dense jungle, moving with patience, precision, and unbroken focus. Every movement, every decision, and every glance had been calculated to avoid detection while gathering information about the unseen enemy. Now, the sniper, who had been a ghost haunting the forest, was visible, revealed not only to the SEALs but to the jungle itself. The final confrontation was about to unfold, and the soldiers knew they had to act quickly, decisively, and flawlessly. The sniper, though finally revealed, had not lost any of his advantage. He was perfectly camouflaged, almost merging with the trees and foliage around him. Every inch of his body was positioned for maximum concealment and protection. Even now, his patience remained unshaken. He understood the terrain, the lighting, and the angles of attack as intimately as the SEALs themselves. It was clear that this final encounter would test not only marksmanship but strategy, teamwork, and nerves under pressure. The team approached carefully, using hand signals to communicate and ensuring that every movement was covered by a teammate. The jungle was alive with tension. The usual sounds of wildlife had faded, replaced by the almost palpable anticipation of the battle to come. Every snap of a twig or shifting shadow could signal a sudden shot, so the SEALs advanced slowly, blending into the undergrowth, keeping their eyes locked on the sniper's position. Every step was measured, every second counted. They had learned from the previous hours that speed was dangerous, that patience and careful observation were their best weapons. Finally, the team managed to encircle the sniper without revealing their own positions. They moved with silent coordination, relying on years of training to anticipate each other's actions. Every member was alert, covering angles, checking lines of sight, and ensuring that no one was exposed. The sniper's skill had forced them into extreme vigilance, but now, having located him, they could act with purpose. It was a delicate balance between maintaining the advantage of surprise and avoiding any sudden mistakes that could be fatal. The sniper, sensing the tightening circle, made subtle adjustments. He shifted slightly, just enough to maintain concealment while observing the SEALs' positions. His calmness under pressure was remarkable. He had controlled the engagement for hours, dictating the pace and instilling both caution and respect in the team. Now, with his position known, the final showdown would test both his skill and the SEAL's ability to adapt to the battlefield he had so carefully shaped. The confrontation was intense but precise. The SEALs coordinated to close in, maintaining cover and ensuring that no gaps in their formation could be exploited. Every movement was synchronized, every decision executed with the calm focus that only the most experienced soldiers could maintain. The sniper, aware that he could be engaged at any second, remained steady. His patience, his understanding of the jungle, and his precision had brought him to this moment unshaken. As the SEALs moved to secure him, the sniper made a final, calculated decision, one that demonstrated the skill and professionalism that had defined his every action. Whether he chose to engage, surrender, or vanish into the jungle once more, it was a testament to the expertise and discipline that had allowed him to dominate the battlefield for hours. The SEALs, despite the tension and danger, maintained their focus, understanding that the conclusion of this encounter required both courage and caution. Once the engagement concluded, the jungle seemed to exhale. The tension that had gripped every soldier began to ease, though the adrenaline still coursed through their bodies. They had faced an enemy unlike any other, someone who had used the environment, patience, and skill to control the battlefield while remaining unseen. The SEALs now had time to reflect on the magnitude of the challenge they had overcome. The sniper's skill had been extraordinary, and even in defeat or retreat, his mastery of the jungle was undeniable. As the team returned to base, the lessons of the mission remained clear. They had been tested not only physically but mentally, emotionally, and strategically. The sniper had forced them to operate at the limits of their training, requiring absolute focus, patience, and teamwork. The jungle had become more than a backdrop. It had been an active participant in the mission, both aiding and complicating every step. The SEALs had learned to respect the environment and the extraordinary skill of the enemy they faced. Back at base, the team recounted the mission, the tension, and the moments when the sniper had seemed invisible and omnipresent. They shared stories of subtle movements, glimmers of camouflage, and the patience required to remain undetected. Every detail underscored the remarkable skill of the sniper and the challenges the team had overcome. The jungle had gone silent once more, but the memory of the encounter would remain vivid. The lesson was clear. Skill, patience, and respect for the environment could turn a single soldier into a formidable force, capable of challenging even the most trained and experienced teams. In the end, the sniper's presence had left an indelible mark. The SEALs had faced a master of patience, camouflage, and strategy. The jungle, once merely a place to traverse, had become a proving ground where skill and environment merged to create one of the most intense challenges of their careers. The story of this mission would be recounted for years, a reminder of the power of discipline, focus, and mastery over both skill and nature. The jungle had tested them, and in surviving, they had not only overcome an extraordinary enemy but also learned the true value of patience, observation, and respect for the unseen forces that shape every battle.